There's something about the woods at night that makes your skin crawl, even if you can't explain why. Maybe it's the way the darkness presses in, swallowing the last flickers of your campfire, or the way every snap of a twig sounds like a warning. Out here, away from the safety of walls and streetlights, you start to realize just how thin the line is between comfort and terror. I used to think the scariest thing about camping was running out of snacks or getting caught in the rain. But that was before I heard the stories, the ones that make you question every shadow, every whisper of wind, every pair of eyes you imagine watching from the trees. Tonight I'm going to share 3 real outdoor horror stories that still haunt campers to this day. These aren't just tales to spook your friends around the fire. These are the kinds of experiences that change the way you look at the wilderness forever. So if you think you're brave enough, keep listening. But I'll warn you now. You will never feel safe in the woods again after hearing these stories. I'd always thought of myself as someone who could handle being alone. I craved it, actually. The quiet, the space to think, the feeling of being completely untethered from the world. That's why I started camping solo, and why, last summer, I found myself hiking deep into the state forest, looking for a spot by the river that I'd only ever seen on maps. No cell service, no other campers, just me and the endless green. The hike in was harder than I expected. The trail was overgrown, and the air was thick with the smell of pine and damp earth. Every so often, I'd hear the distant rush of water, and it pulled me forward, promising relief from the heat. When I finally broke through the last tangle of underbrush and saw the river, it was perfect, wide and slow, with a little gravel bar, just big enough for my tent. I set up camp, feeling like I'd discovered a secret place no one else knew about. That first evening, I sat by the water, letting the current pull my thoughts downstream. The sun dipped behind the trees, and the sky turned a deep, bruised purple. I built a small fire, cooked a simple dinner, and listened to the river's steady song. It was peaceful, almost hypnotic. But as the last light faded, I started to notice the other sounds, the ones that didn't belong to the river. A branch snapping somewhere behind me. The soft, rhythmic crunch of leaves like footsteps trying not to be heard. I told myself it was just a deer, maybe a raccoon. The forest is full of life, after all. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I kept glancing over my shoulder, scanning the tree line for movement. The fire cast long, flickering shadows, and every time the wind shifted, I thought I saw something dart between the trunks. I tried to laugh it off, blaming my nerves and an overactive imagination. But the feeling only grew stronger as the night deepened. I decided to turn in early, crawling into my tent and zipping it tight. I lay there, listening to the river and the occasional snap of twigs outside. My mind replayed every horror story I'd ever heard. Campers vanishing without a trace, strange lights in the woods, things that moved just out of sight. I told myself I was being ridiculous. I was miles from anyone, in a place so peaceful it felt untouched by anything sinister. Sometime after midnight, I woke up to the sound of footsteps. Not the scurrying of a small animal, but slow, deliberate steps circling my tent. My heart hammered in my chest. I held my breath, straining to hear. The steps would stop, then start again, always just out of sight. I fumbled for my flashlight, but the batteries were dead. I cursed myself for not checking them before I left. The footsteps stopped. For a long moment, there was only the river and my own ragged breathing. Then, from just outside the tent, I heard a low, guttural whisper. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was unmistakable, mocking, almost playful. I froze, every muscle tensed, waiting for something to happen. The whisper came again, closer this time, and I realized with a jolt that it was mimicking my own voice. The same cadence, the same nervous laugh I'd let slip earlier in the evening. I wanted to scream, to run, but I couldn't move. The tent felt impossibly small, the thin fabric offering no protection at all. I squeezed my eyes shut, willing it to be a dream, a trick of the mind. But when I opened them, I saw a shadow pass across the tent wall, tall, impossibly thin, moving with a jerky, unnatural gait. It paused as if listening, then slowly traced a finger along the outside of the tent, right where my head was. I don't know how long I lay there, paralyzed by fear. Eventually, the shadow moved away, melting back into the trees. The footsteps faded, replaced by the normal sounds of the forest. I waited until dawn before daring to unzip the tent. Outside, the ground was undisturbed. No footprints, no sign that anyone or anything had been there. But I knew what I'd heard, what I'd seen. I packed up as quickly as I could, barely stopping to eat. As I hiked out, I kept glancing over my shoulder, expecting to see that shadowy figure following me, mimicking my every move. I never went back to that river, and I never camped alone again. Sometimes, late at night, I still hear that whisper in my dreams, my own voice echoing back at me from the darkness, and I wonder what would have happened if I'd answered. If you think being alone in the wild is terrifying, just wait until you hear what happened to a group of friends who thought they were safe together. There's a certain vulnerability that comes with being alone in the wild, sense that every sound, every shadow is meant just for you. Out there, it's easy to believe you're the only one for miles, and that anything lurking in the darkness is focused solely on you. But sometimes, being alone isn't the scariest thing. Sometimes it's the illusion of safety that gets you, the comfort of friends, the laughter around a campfire, the belief that nothing bad can happen when you're together. But the woods don't care how many people you bring. In fact, some of the most chilling stories I've ever heard happened to groups who thought they were untouchable, protected by numbers. If you think being alone is scary, just wait until you hear what happened to a group of friends who thought they were safe together. Their story will make you question whether you're ever truly safe, no matter how many people are by your side. We always thought hiking together made us invincible. There were 5 of us: me, my best friend Tyler, his girlfriend Jess, our 2 other friends, Marcus and Liv. We'd been planning this trip to Black Hollow National Park for months, hyping it up in our group chat, sharing trail maps and ghost stories, daring each other to camp in the most remote spots. We joked that nothing could go wrong as long as we stuck together. Safety in numbers, right? The first day was perfect. Sun was out, the air was crisp, and the trail wound through towering pines and mossy boulders. We laughed, took selfies, and argued over who packed the worst snacks. Every so often, we'd pass another group of hikers. But by late afternoon, the crowds thinned out, and the forest grew quieter. We set up camp near a small clearing, not far from a creek that sung us to sleep. That night, we sat around the fire, telling stories and roasting marshmallows. Tyler tried to spook us with tales of the Black Hollow Shadow, a local legend about a figure that haunted the park, but we all rolled our eyes. It was just the kind of thing you say to freak out your friends. When the fire died down, we crawled into our tents, still laughing. The next morning, Marcus was gone. At first, we thought he was messing with us. He was always the prankster, the one who'd hide behind a tree and jump out at you, or sneak off to take creepy photos. But his sleeping bag was empty, his boots were missing, and his backpack was gone. We called his name, checked the creek, and searched the nearby trails. No answer, no sign of him. Panic set in fast. We split up. Tyler and I headed north. Jess and Liv went south, agreeing to meet back in an hour. The forest felt different now, the trees pressing in, every sound amplified. I kept expecting Marcus to leap out, grinning, but the only thing that greeted us was silence. We regrouped, breathless and anxious. Still no Marcus. That S. When Jess noticed something odd, a series of strange symbols carved into the bark of a tree near our camp. They looked almost like runes, circles, slashes, and spirals, nothing any of us recognized. Liv snapped a photo, her hands shaking. we debated what to do. The park was huge, and we had no cell service. Tyler wanted to keep searching, but Jess insisted we head back to the ranger station for help. In the end, we decided to follow the creek, hoping Marcus had gone that way. As we walked, we found more symbols, each one fresher than the last, as if someone or something was leading us deeper into the woods. The sun was starting to set when we heard it, a faint voice calling for help. It sounded like Marcus, but distorted, echoing through the trees. We ran toward the sound, hearts pounding, but every time we thought we were getting closer, the voice would shift, coming from a different direction. It was like the forest was playing tricks on us, twisting the sound, leading us in circles. We stumbled into a clearing, breathless and desperate. In the center was Marcus's backpack, propped up against a tree, next to it a circle of stones, each one marked with the same strange symbols. The air felt heavy, charged with something I can't explain. We called Marcus's name, but the only answer was the wind rustling through the leaves. Tyler stepped into the circle, but Jess yanked him back, her face pale. "Don't," she whispered. "Something's wrong." We stood there, frozen, until Liv finally broke the spell, grabbing Marcus's backpack and dragging us away. We hiked back to camp in silence, the woods closing in around us. That night, none of us slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those symbols glowing in the darkness. I heard Marcus's voice calling from somewhere just out of reach. The next morning, we made our way to the ranger station, our story tumbling out in fragments. The rangers searched for days, but they never found Marcus. No footprints, no signs of struggle, nothing but those strange symbols which they dismissed as kids messing around. We knew better. Sometimes late at night, I still get texts from Marcus's number. Just a single symbol, the same one we saw carved into the trees. I don't know who or what is sending them, but I do know this. The woods don't care how many friends you have. Out there, you're never really safe. And if you thought losing someone in the wild was terrifying, just wait until you hear what happened to a family on what was supposed to be a peaceful camping trip. There's a special kind of fear that comes with losing someone in the wild, a fear that lingers long after the search parties have given up and the woods have swallowed every trace. It's the not knowing that haunts you, the endless questions with no answers, the symbols and echoes that never quite fade. Sometimes the forest keeps its secrets, and all you're left with is the memory of a friend's voice calling from somewhere you can reach. But as terrifying as it is to lose someone, there are stories that go even deeper, stories where the entire world seems to turn against you, where every shadow hides a threat, and every moment is a fight to survive. If you thought the last story was disturbing, just wait. Because nothing compares to the horror experienced by a family on what was supposed to be a peaceful camping trip. When I was 16, my parents decided we needed a break from screens and city noise. So they packed up the car and drove us out to a state park famous for its endless pine forests. It was supposed to be a reset, a weekend of hiking, fishing, and family time. My little brother Sam was excited for s'mores and ghost stories. I just wanted to get it over with. The first thing I noticed when we arrived was the smell. Sharp, almost sweet, like sap and earth after rain. The pines grew so close together that the sunlight barely touched the ground, and the air felt thick, muffled, as if the forest was swallowing every sound we made. Our campsite was a small clearing, surrounded by trees that seemed to lean in, their branches tangled overhead. Even in the middle of the day, it felt like dusk. We set up our tent and tried to settle in. Dad joked about us being pioneers, but even he seemed uneasy. The silence was heavy, broken only by the occasional caw of a distant crow or the wind rattling the needles. That first night, as we sat around the fire, I kept catching glimpses of movement between the trees, just flashes like something ducking out of sight. I told myself it was deer, maybe a fox, but the feeling of being watched was impossible to shake. After we crawled into the tent, the noises started. At first it was just the wind, but then there were footsteps, soft, deliberate, circling the tent. Sam whispered, "Did you hear that?" And I hushed him, not wanting to scare him more. Dad unzipped the tent and shined his flashlight outside, but there was nothing. The beam barely pierced the darkness, swallowed up by the pines. We tried to laugh it off, but none of us slept well. The next morning, we found our cooler overturned and our food scattered. At first, we blamed raccoons, but there were no paw prints, just strange, deep gouges in the dirt, almost like claw marks, but too big for any animal I knew. Mom tried to keep things normal, making pancakes on the camp stove, but her hands shook as she flipped them. We spent the day hiking, trying to shake off the weirdness. The trails twisted through the forest, and it was easy to get turned around. Every tree looked the same, and the deeper we went, the more the silence pressed in. Sam kept stopping, staring into the woods, saying he saw someone moving between the trunks. Dad told him it was just his imagination, but I could see the worry in his eyes. When we got back to camp, things were missing. My flashlight, Dad's pocket knife, even Sam's favorite hat. We searched everywhere, but it was like they'd vanished. That night, the noises came back louder this time. Branches snapping, something heavy moving just beyond the firelight. I lay awake, listening to my parents whisper, their voices tight with fear. Around midnight, I heard Sam crying. I crawled over to him and he clung to me, shaking. "There's someone outside," he whispered. "They're calling my name." I listened, heart pounding, and sure enough I heard it. A voice, soft and sing-song, drifting through the trees. It sounded almost like Mom, but wrong, stretched and echoing, as if the forest itself was trying to mimic her. Dad grabbed the lantern and stepped outside, yelling for whoever it was to leave us alone. The voice stopped, replaced by a low, guttural growl that seemed to come from everywhere at once. The trees creaked and the wind picked up, swirling around us. I saw something move between the pines, a tall, thin shape, impossibly pale, with eyes that caught the light and glowed like coals. It darted away before I could get a good look, but the image burned into my mind. We huddled together in the tent, too scared to sleep. Every so often we'd hear footsteps or the voice would start up again, always just out of sight. At some point I must have dozed off, because I woke to the sound of Dad frantically packing. "We're leaving," he said, his voice shaking. The sun was barely up as we stumbled through the woods, following the trail as best we could. The forest felt different, darker, colder, as if it didn't want us to leave. Branches snagged at our clothes, and every so often, I'd catch a glimpse of that pale figure. Always just ahead or behind, never close enough to see clearly. Sam tripped and fell, scraping his knee, and as I helped him up, I saw something carved into the bark of a nearby tree. A symbol, a spiral with a slash through it, just like the ones I'd seen in nightmares I couldn't quite remember. We finally made it back to the car, breathless and shaking. As we drove away, I looked back and saw the pale figure standing at the edge of the trees, watching us go. Its eyes caught the morning light, and for a moment, I thought I saw it smile. We never talked about what happened, not really. Dad told the rangers it was a bear, that we'd gotten spooked. Mom threw away the camping gear as soon as we got home. Sam still wakes up screaming some nights, and I can't stand the smell of pine anymore. Sometimes when I'm alone, I hear that voice calling my name, soft and sweet, drifting through the dark. And I wonder what would have happened if we hadn't left when we did, if we'd stayed one more night in the pines. Some things in the woods aren't meant to be understood. Some things just want you to listen. And sometimes if you're not careful, they find a way to follow you home. There's a reason the woods have always been a place of stories and secrets. A place where the line between reality and nightmare blurs as soon as the sun goes down. Each of these stories, whether it's the shadow by the river, the vanished hiker, or the family haunted by something unnatural in the pines, taps into something ancient inside us. It's the fear of being watched when you're alone, the terror of losing someone in a place that doesn't care if you scream, and the dread of realizing that not everything in the wild can be explained away by logic or science. Maybe that's why these stories stick with us long after the campfire's gone cold. They remind us that, no matter how prepared we think we are, nature has its own rules, and sometimes it doesn't want us to understand. The woods are beautiful, but they're also indifferent. They can offer peace, but they can just as easily take it away, leaving you with nothing but questions and memories that never quite fade. So, if you've ever had a strange experience out in the wild, or if you've heard whispers in the dark that you can't explain, I want to hear your story. Now, share it in the comments below, because sometimes the scariest tales are the ones that really happened. And next time you're out in the wild, sitting by a fire or hiking a lonely trail, remember, some things are better left unexplained. Sleep tight, and don't forget to look over your shoulder. The woods are always listening.